This week's episode of Taking Inventory is brought to you by one of our sponsors, Meet Market, your AI assistant for e-commerce marketing. Market isn't just another growth tool, it's a member of your team, helping you keep a pulse on your business and trained to save you time and make you money. It's also co-founded by James Barrow and myself. Visit us at withmarket.com. Now, let's get to the podcast. Ali Manning is the co-founder and COO of Chalice Custom Algorithms, a 2022 AdExchanger Award winner. Chalice's AI software brings company data and analytics together and puts them to work in the real-time decisioning of ad buys. Prior to founding Chalice, Ali spent over a decade leading teams at some of the biggest tech companies in the space, including as the head of strategy and operations at Google, the global head of sales operations at Snapchat, and the head of business operations at Alfred. Very lucky to welcome Ali to the podcast today. Ali, welcome.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here and reconnect with both of you. It's fun to be alumni together.
Yeah, we appreciate it. The Snap Mafia is I think stronger than people even know. It's amazing how many companies out there are being started by former Snapchatter, which is kind of a good segue into I'd love to know kind of how you decided that you were going to start this, and maybe just give us a overview of what does Chalice do, but really kind of how did you guys really decide to it's time that we should start this company and not work at a Snapchat or a Google like you have a lot of your career?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Chalice is on a mission to empower brands to make AI their own. So we believe brands deserve better differentiation, control, better outcomes. And so what we do is make custom algorithms for brands to deploy in their ad buying. And the way to think of it is an algorithm is just a set of rules for making a decision. And brands should be able to write those rules on how they reach consumers, in what context, for what price, and according to whatever goal they have in mind for that consumer connection. So that's what we do. And we started the company on the insight that large brands thrive on differentiation, right? The products that they make and become successful selling are because they're unique products in the market. They then create really differentiated creative to help that product resonate with their core consumer. And then they use media strategy and planning that is also really differentiated to strategically reach their target audience. But then in the final stage, all of that amazing media planning strategy, et cetera, gets flattened through decisioning tech that is shared across everyone, right? Google's decisioning tech is shared across the largest advertisers in the globe to the smallest SMBs. And we decided that brands really care about differentiation. When I was at Google, we would tell brands, we would hear their feedback and say, well, okay, we're not actually going to use that feedback for developing our product because you're unique and we don't build for unique goals, right? And then I would hear at Snap, brands who would say consistently to Snap, we really want you to take on the duopoly of Google and Facebook. That's in the customer's own words, because brands have been yearning for the ability to kind of gain independence and take back some power in the ecosystem. And what's cool about custom algorithms is, so brands have always had the most highly valuable asset for machine learning, and that's training data. The training data is what powers the algorithms. And when you, in most digital advertising, what a brand is doing is just donating their training data to someone else's algorithm. And that algorithm gets smarter based on that training data. And when the algorithm gets smarter, it doesn't get smarter just for the brand who's donated that data, but for all of that brand's competitors, right? For anyone who's in that algorithm. And so we decided that as a real competitive advantage, brands need to invest in this custom technology.
And were there examples prior to founding Chalice of companies that did take this on and advertisers looking at market saying, okay, there is there's a company that started to build custom algorithms. There's the results that we're seeing, and this is an investment worth making?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were two stories that inspired us. One was Netflix, who announced in an earnings call that they had created not just custom algorithms, but the whole custom bidder, and that was increasing their ad efficacy exponentially. I think they discussed it as $100 million investment. And we just said, wow, like if a company who knows algorithms really well, Netflix, is thinking about making its own algorithms for its advertising, that's really powerful. The other was Uber. Uber submitted an award entry to the Ad Exchanger Awards, and Adam, my co-founder, was a judge. And he read the entry, and Uber claimed 8x incremental rides through a custom algorithm. So if you guys remember, Uber got in a lot of trouble in the advertising space, not regulatory trouble, but sort of reputational trouble, because they'd spent so much money just on app downloads. And they kind of got like hosed because the app downloads didn't actually become app registrations and riding users. So I think this was Uber's response to that of, we want to invest much smarter, and we want to drive real outcomes. So we're going to use our advertising to get people riding through the app more. And they used a custom algorithm to do that. They saw 8x the incremental rides. And I think that was another moment where we said, wow, this is really powerful technology. Brands with a lot of technological experience and cash are doing this. But it's a moment where in cloud computing and distributed machine learning, there's no reason why any brand could do this. They just need the access to the technology and the data science. So that's what we provide.
And coming from Daniel's and my kind of background, like we kind of call ourselves like walled garden guys. Yeah. It does like sort of like unapologetically maybe, but like is what you're building and the problems you're trying to solve, are they applicable both to open web and to walled gardens? And then the second question is, can you explain to like the walled garden listeners, because just like a bunch of our former friends are listening, that like, the only thing they know about open web is Trade Desk. Like, yeah. Can you explain kind of like how this all works in open web? So yeah, I know It's two questions. Yeah. Does it work for both? And then how does it actually work when in the context of open RTV?
Yeah. So right now, it's almost exclusively open web. That's simply because the walled gardens haven't opened up to the technology yet. I know Google is considered a walled garden, but so Google's own programmatic platform, DV360, is open to this. So sort of open web, including Google's DV360. And we think the walled gardens are going to open up to this in the next, probably not until 3 to 5 years. But we think there'll be increased pressure to be interoperable, to deliver more to large brands who are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on their platforms. And we think that the walled gardens aren't going to do this themselves because they are built on one single technology to kind of rule all customers, right? I know what you guys were doing at Snap was helping Snap scale into like a much longer tail customer base, or that was at least part of what you were doing, right? And Google was built on SMBs and then, started to serve large brands as well. They sort of all have technology that needs to be one size fits all because their customer bases are so, has such wide breadth. And so anyway, we think that there's the market need for this technology. Walled gardens won't build it, but they'll probably start to open up to it as customers demand it.
And in terms of how it works with OpenRTB, is it you guys can basically like ship custom algorithms over to the DSP and you guys will control kind of all of the bid optimization? Is it also like the mix shift? Like how do where does the algorithm like start and stop?
Yeah, it depends a bit, but So conceptually, the way I think about it is a DSP has two core components. The first, which is the most important, is its technological muscle, right? It needs to see an ad auction, scan all of the different bids, advertisers and bids it could place, and place a bid, right? So it needs to look through 10,000 exclusion lists of their different customers to see, like, am I bidding on this or not for each of these customers? What is the price, the best price in the internal auction that I'm going to promote to the external auction, all that. So they need a lot of technological muscle because all this happens in a microsecond and happens, billions of times a day. So that's the muscle. Then there's also the brain that operates it, right? That says, okay, what are the decisioning rules that are going to determine that last step where I'm placing a bid or not, right? And the decision rules are really about how much to bid. How much is this auction worth to me? And so what we're really doing is taking over that brain capability. And what we're doing is using our software to take in all of the training data that we sort of integrate for a brand. So a brand might have its own first-party data, we might bring in some third-party data. All of that data comes together, gets run through machine learning models that we've built out for the purposes of advertising. The best algorithm gets created, and our data scientists can review that. And then what happens is the algorithm is a mathematical equation about the best way to predict an outcome that a brand cares about. We have to translate that into bidding instructions for the DSP. So that's where the tech also works hard on our side, is to say, okay, if all of these different predictions of, as an example, let's say you're launching a gaming console and you want to price the right bid, you might say, okay, for men 18 to 25 who work in IT, are located in San Francisco and make over 100K, this is worth a bid of $10, right? If it is a woman in Atlanta, makes less than 50K and is unemployed, let's bid $1, right? Or even 10 cents. So what our software is doing is looking at all those different combinations of data points we can tie back to an impression and pricing that accordingly. And so we then have to translate all of those mathematical predictions into those prices. And that takes knowing also what the actual live auction market is doing, right? Because we can understand everyone's value, but we want to price it right so that we're paying the lowest to win the auction as well.
A quick break from one of our sponsors. Meet Market, your AI assistant for e-commerce marketing. Market isn't just another growth tool. It's a member of your team, helping you keep a pulse on your business and trained to save you time and make you money. It's also co-founded by James Barrow and myself. Visit us at withmarket.com. Now back to the podcast. So, Ali, as you've talked about companies embracing a lot of these custom algorithms, at what point do you think it starts to get maybe overly fragmented, or companies start to build too many custom algorithms? Because you mentioned Uber wanting to get riders, but I imagine installs is also important. Re-engagement is important. Maybe a certain number of rides in a month is important in certain markets. And so there's different goals as you start to look at different areas of the business. And so how do you typically talk to clients about approaching multiple algorithms for different goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something we're getting into much more with our existing client base. I mean, typically clients are kind of structured around their goals, right? So you have usually a brand team and a performance team, and the brand team has metrics around reach, maybe their MMM, and hopefully something like brand awareness or some kind of brand health metrics that they're working toward. And so we'll work with that team on what is the right custom algorithm for those goals. Then on the performance side, right, can often just be focused on online sales, but typically our client is focused on something a bit more advanced than that. So the predicted lifetime value of the consumers they're reaching, maximizing that, maximizing profitability, incremental sales. And so we'll talk to the performance teams about that. And so, typically organizationally, they're aligned to like a few sets of true goals, business goals that they're looking to drive. And the challenge is that when they try to use the tech to do that, they are steering against an autopilot that's not driven to that, right? So on the brand side, video algorithms are basically about video completion rates. And so that's super gameable. It has very little to do with brand awareness or other brand health metrics. So you have to rip out the algorithm and replace it with something that's going to optimize directly to brand health metrics. We usually do a survey with that. On the performance side, if you're doing just like last click or last touch online sales, that's also highly gameable. Digital algorithms have gotten really smart at taking credit for sales that would have happened anyway. And so by ripping out the existing algorithm and replacing it with something that is looking at, say, incremental sales, that's not gameable. Getting an incremental sale because the ad had an effect on someone's actions is different. So to answer your question, we're usually working kind of inside the silos that clients have, but we're starting to talk to some about doing kind of like a broader funnel approach, right? So being able to tie back, okay, of customers who were made aware, how many of them did eventually become customers? And you could use a custom algorithm to do that. There's also a lot of brands have goals that kind of live outside of the advertising performance that they're aiming to include in their advertising. The biggest one I can think of at the moment is sustainability. So they want to lower the carbon footprint of their ads and ad campaigns. And so that's something that we could also build in alongside performance. So I think there's a lot of talk in our industry right now about sustainability and improving carbon, but when I have witnessed real conversations about it, it's like, oh, but if it impacts performance, like, performance is king. And what we're working on is in partnership with a company called Scope 3 is the ability to build into the algorithm both performance and carbon reduction and sort of balance both.
And on the carbon reduction side, I saw that on your guys' site. I was curious about that. How are you guys actually measuring the output on that? Is it like computing power? Like what is it that is kind of defined as that?
Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar just with the carbon footprint of advertising, so I think most people are familiar with the fact that crypto and Bitcoin mining has like a huge carbon footprint, right? All those servers processing, all of that data creates a lot of emissions. So it's the same in digital advertising, right? There's all these auctions going on, tons of servers running. And so you end up with also like a lot of carbon emissions coming through digital advertising. So there's a need to reduce that. And the main offenders who produce a lot of carbon are sites who stuff their site with a bunch of ads. So usually like they call it made for advertising sites that really aren't producing their own unique content or serving a user very well. They're like just trying to get an impression, serve a ton of ads on it and make some money. So anyway, so we believe that improving carbon is actually going to improve performance, and we're kind of testing that out now with some clients. The answer on how we measure it is, so Chalice we're not a measurement company, so we don't measure anything. We don't grade our own homework. We always bring in a third-party measurement partner for anything we're optimizing to as a source of truth. And so we work with a company called Scope 3, and I can't speak in detail to their approach, except to say that I know it's imperfect, but it's good. And I think like a good next, like, what do you want to call it? Sort of like good is better than perfect at the moment of climate crisis. We need to just do something versus wait for perfect measurement.
Something else that related to, I think, brand concerns around their advertising, and this one maybe a little more direct to performance, and you mentioned it, is ad fraud, right? Either
Yep.
MFAs made for advertising websites or just pure fraud. And so how do you guys bring that information in to inform how the algorithms operate? And do you care, I guess, whether websites are stuffing ad inventory on it and it's a poor user experience, as long as it's the user that you're trying to reach?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think something I've thought about is like, aren't all websites made for advertising in some way? Maybe not Wikipedia. So we have like a stable of ad fraud partners who we use to like knock out the egregious stuff, right? And what's cool is that some of them, we can actually use their data in a predictive manner. So instead of it being kind of like a block list, that's a little bit of like whack-a-mole, because you're sort of always trying to like identify the next set of bad actors and put them on the list and block them. If you use the data predictively, you can start to kind of sniff out what's likely fraudulent, but hasn't like made it onto someone's list yet. So that's a cool integration. But our perspective on ad fraud and ad quality is that if you're optimizing to a real outcome, like brand lift or incremental sales, you can't really spoof that, right? It's not a gameable metric. And a lot of what the fraud and MFAs are doing is trying to game the system. And so if serving an ad on an MFA is enough of a good user experience that someone is then aware of a brand, like, okay, that has some value to the brand. If it's fraudulent, there's no real way to spoof like someone going in and submitting a survey saying they're more aware of an ad, of a product. So we really kind of not fallback. I would say the way we're out in the market talking about fraud, quality, a lot of the challenges in programmatic, they all stem from decisioning technology that's sort of limited to a few gameable metrics that sort of serve the tech company who's executing the advertising, not the brand who is putting the advertising out there in order to get a real outcome back to their business. And so if you focus on real outcomes, the kind of cream rises to the top.
And how does the obfuscation of user IDs, whether that's cookies or mobile identifiers, how does that affect an advertiser's ability to build out these algorithms and really drive the outcomes that they're trying to?
Well, the good news for us is like over half of our business is CTV based. And so we're like less challenged in some ways by the cookie deprecation, mobile ID challenges. But we have, for instance, a mobile sports betting company who, obviously cares deeply about mobile measurement because what they want us to find is more consumers who are going to make a deposit in the app and start betting. I think we'll eventually work into increasing, betting activity. And so what they already have in place is a mobile measurement partner who can stitch things together on the back end. And why they needed us is that measurement partner is not integrated with their with the Trade Desk, who's their DSP. And so they can't optimize directly in the DSP to that partner's measurement. So in comes Chalice to integrate on both the DSP and the mobile measurement partner side and to bring that together. So So that's kind of how we're approaching it, is like we aren't a partner who solves those challenges directly, but we're a partner who enables a brand who's, is choosing partners to solve those challenges to then bring that right into their ad decisioning.
I think, as we start to near the end of the episode, we want to get into kind of our rapid fire questions, ask you some more broad generalities of the industry and get your thoughts. So the first one, with the proliferation of AI and so much talk about how that's going to impact advertising and the advertising industry, what are some of your predictions for what it means for ad tech, martech, and the like?
Mm-hmm. So since I started my career at an ad agency a while ago, I think it's always been a meme that ad agencies are understaffed, doing a ton of manual work that would be better done by a machine, and that it's like work a lot of work that's not rewarding has to be done by humans still in our industry. So I think the biggest shift will be automation and the ability for people to like partner with a machine to get things done much more easily. And I think the first wave of that is like around campaign setups and other sort of creative tagging, like things that for some reason still take a lot of people a lot of time, but that could be automated. And I think hasn't been automated today because robotic process automation isn't good enough. It needs to be AI based because there's like complex decisions about why certain things are set up certain ways, et cetera. So I think that's one. I think generative AI will help take a great creative idea and like proliferate it in terms of different creative formats and ways to kind of get it in front of people. But I don't think generative AI is going to replace like truly great creative ideas that break through to a consumer. And then of course, in my space, there's a lot of how AI helps make better decisions in advertising. I think most of the other companies in ad tech are thinking about like AI as their own asset, right? Like advertiser, come advertise with me because my AI is going to be better than that other company's AI, right? And we're thinking more of like the AI is the brand's asset. And so maybe we'll see more of that. It's like personalization, AI that fuels personalization in advertising, AI that helps marketers capture the moment with consumers.
And related to that, we've heard a lot about PMax and Advantage Plus, which are, I guess you could say, custom algorithms specifically for those walled gardens. What's maybe the biggest misconception, or kind of what do you think that means for the market and for what you guys are helping brands with?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that those algorithms, it's hard to know what it's doing and how it's servicing your brand because it's a black box. And it's, PMax in particular its street cred seems to be like that. It's no surprise, like self-serving to the platform over the brand, right? So I think like some companies like really need to lean into that. Like if you're a new D2C selling designer jeans, you will benefit from a shared algorithm where all the other designer jean companies are donating data to that algorithm to make it smarter, right? Like suddenly you're in people's Instagram feeds who are shopping your much better, well-funded competitors because Meta knows like that person is now in market for designer jeans, and like why not serve this new entrant in the category to these consumers. So some companies definitely should use that. But if you have enough data and if you have enough data and want to like leapfrog your competitors, I think you have to go with something that's not shared and black box.
And so with that, what are your thoughts about third-party data aggregators?
Do you mean like companies who are selling audiences back to advertisers?
Exactly. So like an
Yeah.
Experian or TransUnion or
Hmm.
Nielsen that have packaged audiences, and send that into a Meta or Google for advertisers to take advantage of, and presumably are also part of those algorithms.
Yeah. So that's really powerful data. But it's again like shared, right? If I buy this XYZ segment, there's nothing blocking my competitor from buying them, right? So it kind of everyone in the automotive company category buys auto intenders, right? So there's no differentiation there. But also a problem with that is that if I'm in the auto intender audience, like I'm valued the same as everyone else in the auto intender audience. But as we know, like everyone has a different value as an auto intender, and every impression has different value too, right? And getting in front of me as an auto intender on an automotive review site is different than getting me as an auto intender while I'm scrolling through my social feed. So we actually work with some of the third-party data providers on using their data as predictive. So basically saying how predictive is someone being in the auto intender audience for the outcome the brand's trying to drive. And then when you do that, when you like match, are they an auto intender with their gender, age, income? We might bring in a B2B data provider to tell us their job title. Like when you start stitching all that data together, suddenly you have an auto intender data is now part of the prediction. It's not like a turn it on or turn it off. And so really proud of the third-party data partnerships we have because these are companies who are really leaning into what we think has to be the next wave of audience data, which is making it predictive, not using it just for segments or targeting, because they are also kind of threatened by like cookies going away and all the changes in privacy kind of impacting that use of their data.
So you've worked at some of the biggest names in the walled garden space, Google and Snapchat, and then now you're working with the biggest names in open web, Trade Desk among others. Like, have you found that there's a different sort of DNA when working with both sets of companies, kind of a different approach? Obviously, inherently there's like a different ethos, but have you noticed anything just given that you've been on kind of both sides now?
Yeah. So my sense of it is that the walled gardens are truly walled in, even in terms of how their employees think about or relate back to the industry. So when I worked at Google and Snap, I didn't think about the ad tech industry kind of at all, right? Like and I think that's the case for most people who work in the walled gardens is those companies can afford a lot, right? They can afford like perks and pay, but they can also afford to kind of be insular and not think about competition at all, right? They have dominant market power. Even Snap, who didn't have dominant market share at the time we were there, had dominant market power because it was sort of owning the cultural moment, right? And so you can have this like exceptionalism view inside the company, like nobody does what we do. We don't have competitors. We don't care what other people are building. We're going to build for ourselves, and we don't need to integrate with anyone. Like there's no additional value getting, external measurement on the platform. Snap was a little more open about that, but and what that can unintentionally mean is that people are making decisions that kind of undermine the larger industry dynamics, right? Like healthy competition, et cetera. But also I think it was a disservice to me. When we started fundraising for Chalice, Adam, my co-founders' networks were much more extensive in the industry, right? My network is extensive as it relates to Googlers and Snapchatters. And for the most part, my Googler network is all still working at Google. and my Snapchat network has expanded more. But my co-founders had, years in the open web industry. And so they they just know a lot more people in the industry. So that's to say, on the open web side, it's like truly a web. Everything is interdependent. Everyone is focused on integrating or partnering because they need to. And I think that like creates a real sense of industry, win-win, all of those like positive, like it creates this sense of like the rising tide floats all boats. And that's been really exciting for me because I have much broader perspective on our industry now. 3 years in now, I have an extensive network in the industry. And so I think the walled gardens are great if you want to go wall yourself off, maybe like land a job and land it for the rest of your life, which a lot of people have done at Google. But I think if you want kind of a thriving career with a lot of optionality, being in the open web is a really fun and exciting place.
So Allie, where can people learn more about Chalice and what you're working on?
Yeah. So our website is chalice.ai. My favorite section of that is our case studies section because we have some really cool examples of the work we do. You could also follow Chalice on LinkedIn, but I think following the two co-founders, myself, Allie Manning on LinkedIn, and my co-founder, Adam Heimlich on LinkedIn, gives like a really authentic kind of approach to how we're thinking about things and how the company is growing and evolving over time.
Fantastic. Well, Allie, it was fun reconnecting post Snap Days. Thank you so much for joining us and walking us through all that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed just reconnecting with the two of you, but also getting to talk a bit about the things that I'm most excited about in the industry.
Awesome. Thanks again for doing this.
Before you go, we need your help. If you enjoyed this week's episode of Taking Inventory, then subscribe or rate wherever you listen to the podcast. And while you're at it, please share this episode or your favorite episode with a friend. We'll be back next week with another episode of Taking Inventory. See you then.